everyone. Welcome to 33 Voices. We're delighted to be with Greg Horowitt today at the speaker series in Go San Diego. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Can we start out with you telling us, coming to a startup event in San Diego, you just gave a great presentation on the importance of having great relationships and being in your space and embracing your space for what it is. So being in San Diego, we're not thinking of going to Silicon Valley. Tell us about the rainforest and what it's like being a startup in San Diego.
Well, the rainforest was a way for us to describe kind of what we were observing and the difference about why one place was more innovative than another. And the mindsets that kind of dominated the business side of economies was very linear, predictive. You develop a competency and you just figure out how to do it bigger and better and more efficiently, and that was what created the success factors. But in these kind of innovative, small, knowledge, creative companies, what we were finding is that there was a lot of randomness, serendipity that was involved. And what I was curious about was whether it was just complete fate as to whether you were successful or not, or was there something purposeful you could do to kind of stack the odds in your favor? In other words, almost manufacture your own luck around this. And we found that there absolutely was, that there were certain conditions that you could take advantage of in a knowledge economy. And my work here in San Diego was really about how to make that happen.
And so, I mean, as we've seen this week, we've got a lot of people competing for resources. So San Diego is a rainforest, and as you shared with us, that's where you wrote the book. But we still have some catching up to do, not to compare us with Silicon Valley, but we're not there completely yet. But what excites you most about San Diego? Because here you are. There has to be something.
Yeah. So one is, of course, the quality of life, what we call amenities of place. We like the idea of having this work-life balance. We're never too far away from anything, so the opportunity costs are really low because our geography is compact. So we can take a meeting in the morning up at the Connect offices, and then finish that meeting and then still be back at our offices in time for a lunch, and then head somewhere else for another meeting. And they're very low, whereas in the Bay Area, the geography is so spread out that you actually have to plan around the commute, plan around the travel, where here you don't really have to think much about that.
Right. So, I mean, do you see surfing in the morning as something that's getting in the way of productivity, or is it actually helping?
So it's not so much that it gets in the way, but the thing about ecosystems, they're all self-selecting. People choose to be in one region versus another, and people choose to be here in San Diego for exactly what San Diego has to offer. It's intellectually exciting, so we do a lot of R&D. We do have the beaches, so we have a wonderful, ability to, as you say, surf in the morning and then, hit the office. And people choose to be here in San Diego for that reason versus other places.
So you've advised hundreds of startups. And as you do that each day, what's the first thing? So if you could tell a startup only one message, what would you tell them about brand awareness in particular?
I don't know so much about, what do you mean by brand awareness?
Right, something that came up in one of our founders' interviews recently was a company had a great launch, they launched their idea, and then they went into beta. And they spent 4 months really iterating the product. So they lost communication.
You could build the best product in the world, but if people don't know about it, it's
people
useless.
don't know about it, and if I'm not engaging with you as a user and creating that human connection. So I guess everything we hear today about brand awareness is be a human. Like you said with Steve Jobs in your presentation, he's not selling you a phone. He's selling you an experience, and he's selling you an identity.
Correct.
How can people do that?
Doing it the exact same way. First of all, a company is often an extension of your own belief system, and the products are just the manifestation, the physical manifestation of that. But before the product ever gets manifested, you've actually got the belief system you have. In the case of Apple, it was the design matters, that a product should be as beautiful on the inside as it is on the outside, that it should be fun to use and make you feel good about using it more than just have the utility of using it. And then it just became an extension. So the way you kind of communicate that is by creating the right messaging. And just like religions, when you are kind of preaching it, you look for those people who have the same belief system or are seeking that same belief system, rather than trying to boil the ocean and saying that we have to convert everybody out there. It's find out who aligns with your message and how do you kind of get that. So part of it is targeting your message. Who are the people that you think should be buying your product and should be aligning with you. What is the best way to communicate with them, and find a way to communicate with them in a way that's meaningful to them also, that will resonate. Because once you can create that emotional resonance, then people say, I believe what they believe, and now I'll go to battle for them. And that's really the ultimate goal.
So on the subject of Apple still, you were talking about Arthur Rock in your presentation and how Steve and Woz came in there, well, they're both Steve, and they smelled like he was on the fruitarian diet and disheveled and it was a mess. But they went on to do some pretty decent stuff, I'd say.
Yeah.
So when giving a pitch, is it more your idea that matters, or does presentation still really matter?
Even between those two, story matters. The one skill set that all entrepreneurs must have, and is a critical success factor, they've got to be great storytellers. And two things have to happen in that story. One is you have to be able to see the future. Two, you have to be able to see yourself in that future. You've got to understand how you fit into that new reality. And once you do that, you emotionally resonate with it, and you feel different today about what yet hasn't happened. You create that future memory. And that's what then creates the motivation to act.
So for an early company then who doesn't necessarily have a story developed yet, how do you get that across and still be so emotionally engaging?
That's a good question. They have to work on that. Okay. So it's one thing to work on your presentations and your pro formas and all that, but if you get in front of an investor and it just becomes static and uninteresting, you'll never get that second meeting. So that second meeting will come from when you get the other person on the other side of the table excited and saying, I still don't know everything about your business, but I'm intrigued. I'd love to learn more. Why don't we set a time to have that? And that's really the goal.
Right.
And so really having that story is critical.
So Greg, you've described startup work as a body contact sport. And I'm a huge football fan. I love the Nike ad that says every damn day. Just do it every day. As a startup founder who occasionally runs into challenges, probably more than occasionally, how do the most successful entrepreneurs overcome it every day?
Well, first of all, in their mindset, they have to realize that this is a 20-mile march. It's a term coined by Jim Collins. That it's relentless incrementalism. It's about these small goals that build to the longer goal. So it's not about taking these huge leaps. It's about lots of little steps and rewarding yourself after you take each step. So celebrating the small victories.
How do you celebrate these victories? We hear that a lot, but how do you actually celebrate them?
It can everything by just giving yourself permission to take an hour off to half a day off, to doing things with your colleagues and coworkers and saying, we're moving in the right direction and I really appreciate everything you're doing. So it can be rewarded in a way or it can be celebrated in a way that's meaningful for you. Some people do employee recognition things where you say, we're getting there, and so we want to recognize that you have done something. So you can give employees days off or things like that.
All right. So now as a risk manager, also known as an investor, a venture capitalist, how do you advise people who are about to pitch to minimize that risk perception?
It's a good question, because all good deals have risk. And so there's kind of 4 steps to the risk. One is risk identification and risk awareness. The second one is risk assessment. The third is risk allocation, and the fourth is risk management and mitigation. So first of all, understanding where your risk sits. So what is it that we know, but don't we know? All the things we don't know, what do we have to know? If we don't get it, what is the cost of not knowing it? And so it almost becomes a process for assigning risk. And then letting yourself feel comfortable with that. And understanding that the entrepreneurial process is highly dynamic. That even once you get information, 10 minutes later it's going to evolve and change. And so not relying on static information, which is the kind of predict and repeat, well, just because it worked this way before, then it most certainly will work this way again. It's also helping, another way to deal with risk is pattern awareness. So looking for patterns in things you're doing. This looks a lot like something we've seen before. And when those patterns have presented themselves, we've acted in this way. So you're not overwhelming the RAM in your brain, every time looking at every new thing as if you've never seen it before. But it's saying, this is somewhat familiar, and therefore we can act with reasonable assurance, and if it doesn't work out, we'll correct quickly. That's why we said try fast, fail small, learn quickly, and evolve rapidly. So it's this cycle of iteration. Absolutely.
So in honor of this week, Greg, we'd love to end with you highlighting a startup here in San Diego that you're particularly excited about.
And T2, please.
Well, I think she's referring to that we have so many startups that we're involved in, some more mature than others, but one of our early stage companies that we're involved with that we just really love is a company called Ground Metrics. It's one of those things that when you first look at the technology, it's not like super sexy like a social media. It's an electromagnetic sensor that when you put it on a surface, particularly the ground, you can do the equivalent of getting a sonogram. It actually takes a picture of what's underneath. Well, they use it in the oil drilling and recovery space. And so before you had to drill deep down and image across the field and you just get a two-dimensional thing. This gives you a three-dimensional picture with much less direct intervention and at a much lower price point. But the thing we love about these kind of exciting companies is like this one, is the economic potential. Because these oil fields, the drilling costs are millions of dollars, a week to look at, and you can save these companies. So, great entrepreneur, one of the best we've worked with. Does everything he says he's going to do. Imaginative, creative, a bit naughty, friendly, perseveres, sticks to it, and has wonderful ethics, and just honorable. And so these entrepreneurs not only become inspirations and role models for us, but they all become friends.
So for anyone who wants to get funded, follow those patterns.
And for anybody who wants to learn more about your work and your book, can you tell them how they can reach you?
Absolutely. So go to our website at t2vc.com or look at the rainforestbook.com, or you can just Google us. And unfortunately or fortunately, you'll find out far more information than you'd ever want to know.